So welcome to this, I guess, session of EMZ 496. I really appreciate you clicking on this presentation. And in this section, or this presentation, I really like to talk about health economics and as it pertains to our EMS profession and paramedics and EMTs in particular. So the stigma behind economics is that it's just incomprehensible. It's a lot of math. I just can't understand it. And to be perfectly honest, I entered the medical profession, starting my EMT courses, starting my paramedic courses, thinking the same exact thing about the medical profession. And really, it is very comprehensible, even without math. You really, to understand economics, you do not really need um, any serious mathematical skills. Um, it's very similar to the medical profession and physicians, and we kind of make up these esoteric terms to make ourselves seem smart. It's the same in medicine as it is in economics. So when we're talking about economics, we're really talking about just simple human behavior and how we consume products, how we demand products, how products are supplied. And all these concepts can really be explained and understood without math, without mathematics, without complex um, equations. And even when we introduce equations, which I'll throw a few equations at you through this presentation, and um, they're really very understandable when we break them down. Not complex calculus terms, nothing to that extent. Now, you probably don't believe me quite yet that economics can be easily understood without math or anything to that point. But I'll just point out that when I started my EMS career, some 15 years ago or so, um, I started my EMT, my paramedic programs, and I ran into a lot of medical terms, a lot of Greek terms, a lot of Latin terms, and one of my favorites, it remains one of my favorites to this day, the medical term of anterior epistaxis secondary to digital trauma. That is a really fancy way and really kind of esoteric way to say that my nose is bleeding because I picked it. I picked my nose and now it's bleeding. Anterior epistaxis is just a common nosebleed. Secondary to is just it means because of, and then digital trauma. My digit is my finger, and trauma is obviously some sort of trauma. So my nose is bleeding because I picked my nose is the medical term for just that common nosebleed. And I love that because that is a perfect example of how we use these esoteric terms to separate ourselves from the lay public. And economists do the same thing, except we do it using equations. And we use it using similar kind of esoteric terms, but usually mathematical equations. And usually these equations, when you break them down, are really understandable. And I'll point one out to you here that you'll see a little bit later on, and I'll explain again. But this is just when we're talking about insurance and why we have health insurance. We're talking about risks and monetary losses, and what we're really interested is the variance of our loss. So this is just an economic equation that we use pretty frequently in health economics, and it's just the variance of our loss. And when you see here, pi here, I is just it's just the one person. I is person one, person two, person three, person four. Pick your person, Jerry, Susan, Denise, whoever. Pick your person. But we're interested in this Greek letter, and this Greek letter just represents whatever we want it to represent. We've kind of made up this Greek. We've taken this Greek letter and made up whatever we want it to represent in this equation. It's pretty simple there. We just kind of pick something and make it up as we go. So pi here is the probability of loss. It's on a scale from 0 to 1. So a 0.5 probability of loss is a 50% chance of me getting sick. As an example, as a simple example, L here, the big L here, is just the loss in terms of monetary loss. If I get sick, I lose $5,000, let's say. If I get sick, I have to go to the hospital and I incur a bill of $5,000. That's what L represents right there. It's just loss. And then the Greek letter micro right there, you'll probably see that used in medical terms and micrograms, but it's just a Greek a Greek term, a Greek letter that we use in economics as well. So we just take micro, use that, and make it mean whatever we want, and that's the expected value of our loss. And micro there is we'll parse it out a little bit later on in this presentation, but micro there is this loss in money times the probability of that loss. So here we're looking at variance, which is a little different, but micro is L times pi, and then we're squaring that term, and then that big kind of E looking funky thing is just a summation marker, so we can condense this equation. So if we have, say, 2 people in this insurance marketplace, we just have Denise and Michael in this insurance marketplace. It's just, this is Denise, and then we're adding plus Michael, and it's the same equation right there. And then if we have 3 people, it's this plus this plus this. So the summation just condenses this equation down. So when we have 100 people, we don't have to do this equation plus ad infinitum until we get to person 100. We can kind of do this summation. But as you see, we just kind of take these Greek letters or these English letters here and just kind of make them whatever we want to make them. So that's just the way economists make these esoteric terms. Same as medical in their Greek and Latin roots. We're just kind of co-opting them in our own way. So what is economics? At its base, when we talk about economics, we talk about how we allocate resources under constraints of scarcity. So economics is based on the notion that individuals have to give up something in order to get something. So resources are finite, whether you're talking about nasocannulas, saline, drug shortages, the number of ambulances in your district. Something is scarce. So how do we allocate that? And whenever we talk about allocation of scarce resources, we're talking about economics. A second feature of economics is rational decision making. Basically, we think that, or we assume that people are making rational decisions, decisions that further one's own goals. And the third is we're talking about marginal analysis. We're talking about this when we talk about economic analysis, we're looking at the margin. So cost benefit based on the marginal unit. When we're talking about that, we're looking at when we talk about unit decisions, we're talking about the decision from unit 1 to 2. We're talking about the decision from unit 2 to 3. We're talking about the decision from unit 3 to 4. Pizza slice 1 to 2, pizza slice 2 to 3, pizza slice 3 to 4. We're not talking about pizza slice 1 to pizza slice 6. We're going 1 unit at a time, and that's what we talk about when we're talking about at the margin. So does economics apply to our healthcare arena? Now, compared to other markets, healthcare itself is a different market. First of all, we talked about the extent of uncertainty, the presence of uncertainty. Consumers on our demand side are really uncertain about their own health status, and they don't really know what type of health care that they need. On the other side, on the producer side, the supply side, again, the product is uncertain whether or not a certain treatment is going to work and how much of that treatment is going to be needed. Also, healthcare markets differ because of insurance. So insurance itself is just weakening the link between price and the quantity demanded. So when you go out to a restaurant, you know the exact price for the exact amount of food that you're going to get. With insurance, that kind of creates this middleman where you're not quite sure of the price and may alter your choices of what to use and what not to use. Lastly, we talk about problems with information. Basically, again, on the uncertainty side, we have a lack of information on one side or on the other side, either the consumer side or the producer side. So we've got this asymmetric information, imperfect information. The physician doesn't know what's wrong with you when you first walk in, and you don't know what's wrong with you when you walk in. So there's asymmetric information coming from either side. Additionally, we have in healthcare a lot of nonprofit firms. We don't have while there are for-profit firms and companies out there, a large part of healthcare is produced by nonprofit firms. And, you know, we have for-profit firms and we know they maximize profits. We don't quite know what nonprofit firms maximize. We have our theories, but no hard and true answer to that question. Competition-wise, there's licenses all over the place. Paramedics have to be certified, nurses have to be licensed. There's regulation up and down the road in every healthcare sector that needs to be dealt with in this market. The role of equity and need is kind of more of a ethical, philosophical, moral argument, if you will. How should healthcare be delivered to the masses? Who deserves it? Who doesn't? At what point is it my fault for being sick? At what point is it society's, not fault, but society's problem for me being sick? And when should society step in? And how much should we help others? Lastly, we talk about government subsidies, public provisions. Just like insurance, government subsidies are going to alter behavior in some fashion. Now, before we really delve into some of the other concepts, we'll talk real quick just about simple supply and demand. Our demand curve is going to represent the relationship between price of a good or a service and the quantity of that good or service that's being demanded, holding all other factors constant. So we always need to find 2 points for a line. We can find the slope of that demand curve. So we can see here at a price of $7.50, if we follow it on over, somewhere around 215 apples, at least in this graph, will be demanded. Movement along this line itself is a change in quantity demanded. If we move up to that dotted line, that demand curve doesn't change in its curve, but it moves outward. That's just an increase in demand. So there is a difference between increase in demand and increase in quantity demanded. If that line is moving out to the dotted line, we have an increase in demand. And things that are going to increase demand or decrease demand are things like income. If I have an increased income, I'm going to demand more regardless of price. Same thing with decreasing income. I'm going to demand less of most goods, at least. The prices of other goods, other services, comparable goods, comparable services. If the price of apples goes up and up and up, I'm probably going to shift my preference from apples to pears or apples to oranges, just some other fruit. So the prices of other goods are going to influence the demand for this good or service. Again, we talked about insurance. So insurance is kind of shielding us from the full cost of a service, from, say, an x-ray or an ambulance ride. So that's going to change my demand for that service since I'm not paying full price. And then tastes, basically trends, what I like, what society likes. Things are trendy one moment and not trendy the next moment. That's also going to affect demand for that good. On the supply side, just like with demand, our supply curve is a relationship between the price of a good or service and the quantity supplied by a producer holding all other factors constant. Just bear in mind supply curves are going to be upwardly sloping, demand curves will be negatively downward sloping. And again, same thing with the movement along the supply line, supply curve. That's going to be a change in quantity supplied. And then same thing with demand, we can have a change in supply. So like with demand, we can have a change in supply. So what things would shift that supply line? Be things like technological changes. It gets cheaper, let's say, to administer an X-ray or a CAT scan. Technology advances, gets cheaper for us. That way we can increase our supply. Input prices, again, based on cost. If my supplies cost less, I can produce more at the same cost to me as a producer. The size of the industry is going to affect the supply curve, and increase supply, decrease supply. The number of firms in that industry are going to affect this. We talk about weather, some sort of environmental impact. Think weather, tornadoes, floods. Those are all going to have both short-term and sometimes long-term effects on supply. We put the demand curve and the supply curve on the same graph, same chart there, and we find what's called the equilibrium, basically where demand and supply intersect. This is going to be our equilibrium. So find the demand line for a good or service, find the supply line, and then where they intersect, it's going to be our equilibrium point. So here, if we stick those two lines together, see equilibrium price is going to be about $5 for a bushel of apples, and 300 bushels are going to be demanded for that equilibrium price. And that's going to be in just a perfectly equilibrated market. What do we mean when we talk about a production function? So in health, if we're talking about the production function of health, we're looking at the relationship between my health and the inputs, my health inputs. So how often do I go to my physician? How often do I take my medication? How much medication do I take? How much do I exercise? What's my nutrition like? So all of these are health inputs, and what is the relationship to my overall health? So if we look at this graph here, you can see on this x-axis here are all my healthcare inputs, and we've just labeled them 1, 2, 3, and upwards. And how much kind of health is that going to give me? We've kind of quantified that here on the y-axis. You notice if I start at 0 and start adding 1 or 2 or 3 healthcare inputs, health inputs, my health status increases pretty dramatically. Then it starts to slow down. So as I get up here, this curve starts to slide and kind of loses that sharpness. So we've got this diminishing marginal product. So the more inputs I add, at some point it's not going to do a whole lot for my overall health. So like we saw in that graph, my health status increases as more inputs are added. There's this point where it's kind of diminishing marginal product. So that marginal product, as I add more and more inputs, the addition of that one extra input isn't doing a whole lot for me. That one input will do a lot when I first start, but as I add more and more and more inputs, that single input is not going to do much for me. So let's talk about the demand for health. So there's some key concepts here in the healthcare market that we need to be cognizant of. First off, people want health. They demand medical care in order to produce health. So we're not really demanding medical care. What we're demanding is health. Secondly, consumers don't just purchase health passively from the market. Instead, we're actually producing health. We're combining time, devoting that to these health improving inputs and efforts with these purchased medical inputs like a doctor's office visit. Thirdly, health lasts for more than one period, and what that means is it doesn't depreciate instantly. It can be kind of analyzed like a capital good. It lasts for a long time, so one input could have lasting repercussions on health. And then lastly, health can be treated both as a consumption good and as an investment good. As in a consumption good, health is really demanded, desired, because it makes us feel better. We like that. As an investment good, because it lasts for more than one time period, Health is demanded because it increases the number of healthy days that are available to us to work, to earn income, to engage in activities that we enjoy. All right, so for you visual folks, kind of like I am, here's a little quick schematic of what we've been talking about. So I take my healthcare inputs, I take my diet, my exercise, even income, and the amount of time I devote to my health. I create some sort of capital stock. It continues over time. So health is not, you know, is over multiple time periods like we said. So it continues on over time, and those outputs we get every year. We've got our healthy days, good physical health, good mental health, low limitations on activity and things like that. So let's talk about asymmetric or imperfect information for a little bit. When we start talking about asymmetric information in a marketplace, we start to talk about the Lemons principle. We start thinking of a market like a used car market. So first off, the potential buyer really doesn't know the quality of the used car that he's looking at. So when the potential buyer only knows the average quality of the cars within the marketplace, the market prices will tend to be lower than the true value of good cars. So owners of the top quality cars will tend to withhold their cars from sale since the market prices will be lower than what the car's value is. And this has become known as the Lemons principle. So the bad drives out the good until basically no market is left. So as the good cars leave the marketplace because they're not going to get the price that they deserve, that they're valued at, they're going to leave the marketplace, lowering the average quality of the car, lowering the average price of the car. And as that price gets lower and lower, more and more of the better cars are going to leave the marketplace, and you're all going to have terrible cars, and that market is going to collapse in on itself. In healthcare, especially the insurance marketplace, we talk about asymmetric information and perfect information in terms of adverse selection. So basically, I know more about my own health expenditures and my expected health expenditures than does my insurance company. They're just kind of trying to guess a little bit. But I really know how healthy I am, how sick I am, and how much health care I use up in a given year. So in this market, untouched, the higher health risk people are going to drive out the lower health risk people, because all we know is average health. So that's going to drive out those better cars, right? It's going to drive out the lower health risk people, the people who are less sick. Now, if we group all these people together, the lower risks are grouped with the higher risk people that all pay the same premium regardless. The lower risk insured, the less sick people, face this unfavorable rate. They're paying way too much than will the higher risk people. And these lower risk people are going to underinsure in this marketplace. On the other side, the higher risk people, they're facing a favorable premium. They're paying a lot less in the premium than they should be, and therefore they're going to overinsure. They're going to buy more insurance than they really need. This all leads us to the big question of what is insurance? We'll start with a simple example of what kind of insurance is in a broader sense. So let's take a club or group. It's got 100 homogeneous members. They're all the same. And about once a year, one of those 100 members gets sick, and it incurs healthcare costs of about $5,000. So this incidence of the illness or the sickness seems to be random. So the club members worry about potential losses. Any one of them can fall ill in any given year and be out $5,000. So instead, they collect $50 from every member. They add that $5,000, put it in the bank, safekeeping, earns a little bit of interest, and it's sitting there for when one of those members falls ill. So when one of those 100 members falls ill, the fund is there to pay for his treatment. So that's basically what insurance is. So everyone is paid a little bit to avoid the risk of uncertainty. No one knows who's going to fall ill, so they've paid a little bit into that to avoid the risk of that financial loss of the $5,000. So I pay $50 a year, and if I become ill that year, I'm not out $5,000. So there's some terminology in the insurance marketplace that we should be familiar with. First is a premium, and that's just what I'm paying for the insurance policy. So I have to pay a premium every month or every few months, every week, depending on the insurance company and coverage. We have co-insurance, co-payments. A lot of insurance policies require these, and co-payment and co-insurance is the percentage paid by the insured person is the co-insurance rate. So with for example, with a 20% co-insurance rate, if out of a $150 bill, I'm going to be paying $30 of that, and that's a $30 co-payment and 20% co-insurance. I'm also on the hook for a deductible with a lot of policies. This is the amount of the healthcare cost that is paid directly out of pocket by the insured person. This is regardless of co-insurance and co-payments. So basically the insurance doesn't apply until the insured pays some deductible up to some out-of-pocket cost. Exclusions, these are services, conditions that aren't covered by your insurance policy. A lot of policies won't cover cosmetic surgery or experimental treatments, for example. Some insurance policies may have limitations. These are just maximum coverages provided by that policy. It's a lifetime coverage cap of, say, maybe $1 million, $2 million, $3 million. But it's just a lifetime coverage cap. Once you've hit that cap, no matter what your age, what your health status, insurance policy will not pay out any further. We talk about pre-existing conditions, so these are medical problems that are not covered if the problems existed prior to you getting that insurance. So things like pregnancy, cancers, usually HIV, sometimes even chronic conditions like diabetes or heart failure considered pre-existing conditions for some insurance policies. We have pure premiums. These are the actuarial losses associated with the events of being insured. What this means is for that member that got sick and had to pay $5,000 for the insurance company, the actuarial losses are $5,000. That's the loss, the cost associated with that illness. This is separate from loading fees, which are just administrative costs for the company. These general costs associated with the insurance company just doing business. So, for example, sales, advertising, this kind of feeds into profits as well. So loading fees are the costs above and beyond the actuarial costs. All right, so let's take our examples of insurance and combine them with concepts of risk. There are two primary theories of why people demand health insurance, why people buy health insurance. The first, the oldest, is the standard gamble model. It basically says that people purchase health insurance just to avoid risk, and just stops it right there, just risk. More recently, there's the Nyman model, which states that people purchase health insurance because they basically desire financial access to medical care. Medical care has become very expensive, no longer easy to pay for it out of pocket. So we purchase insurance just so we have that financial backing so we can get the health care we need when we need it. Under the standard gamble model, many of the choices that we make as individuals and healthcare consumers basically involve a lot of uncertainty, right? So uncertainty about the timing of when I'm going to get sick, when I'm going to get hurt, I basically don't know. The amount of the expenditure, I don't know how sick I'm going to get, how hurt I'm going to get, so I can't reliably predict how much money I'm going to have to spend. And then also the types of treatment required. I don't know what's going to be needed when I get sick or when I get injured. So because most people are generally risk adverse, they don't like risk, I don't like risk, they're willing to pay to avoid risk. So with this, we have pooling arrangements and help just mitigate this risk and mitigate these individual losses by pooling lots of people together. What these pooling arrangements do is basically in any given time period, the benefits paid out to a single consumer may be higher or lower than the premiums received from that consumer. So that person may be more sick, less sick, more injured, less injured than we thought they would, more or less than the premiums we've received as the company. So by operating on a large scale, taking in lots of people, this pools and spreads the risk out so that the premiums more than cover the actual costs for all the people on that policy. In the newer model, the more contemporary model, Nyman's theory of demand, basically medical interventions cost a lot more than people just have in the bank or have in terms of their net worth. So we need to financially protect ourselves. So people value this health insurance because they desire an income transfer, basically from those who are healthy in the event that they become ill. Basically, I'm healthy right now, but I'm still paying into health insurance. So that goes into a fund that helps pay for someone else's illness or injury. So that's an income transfer from me to them, or a number of subscribers to one single person. And this protects us financially when we become ill or injured. Nyman's model departs from the standard gamble model in a couple ways. Basically, Nyman points out there are a lot of inconsistencies associated with that conventional model. First off, moral hazard is always welfare decreasing. So moral hazard is basically when I have insurance, it's going to affect my behavior. It's going to change my behavior. So when I don't have auto insurance, when I don't have car insurance, I'm going to drive very, very carefully. But once I'm insured, I'm not so worried about driving so carefully. So it's going to change my behavior a little bit. Moral hazard in healthcare means that when I get insurance, I'm going to go to the doctor more often. I'm going to seek out more healthcare inputs because the cost to me is offset. The standard gamble model says this is always bad. It's always welfare decreasing. It's always a bad thing. Nyman points out that not all moral hazard is bad. If I wasn't going to the doctor when I didn't have insurance, and all of a sudden now I have insurance and I start going to the doctor, that's a good thing. It's usually a good thing up until a certain point. Also, the voluntary purchasing of health insurance makes people worse off when he's kind of pointed out that it doesn't necessarily make us worse off. So on that moral hazard side, someone's going to take more risks because someone else bears the burden of those risks. That's what we mean when we talk about moral hazard. And the conventional theory treats insurance as a reduction in consumers' out-of-pocket price. So of course we're going to take more risks, right? However, like we said, moral hazard in the case of health insurance means I'm going to go to the doctor more often. I'm going to bungee jump more often. I'm just going to seek out more health inputs. So studies have found that really that transition from uninsured to insured or underinsured to fully insured really results in really big improvements in people's health. What this implies is that when I get additional healthcare inputs, it's not as terrible as that standard model would have you believe. Instead, Nyman suggested that that insurance payoff should actually be considered as an income transfer. Basically, this means that insurance coverage shifts the demand for medical care to the right, shifts it outward, and the result is less inefficiency instead of less efficiency. Boil down Nyman's model, the basic idea is that purchasing insurance basically reduces my income when I'm healthy by the amount of the premium that I'm paying or an opportunity cost, but it's going to raise my income through an income transfer when I'm sick and I need that benefit. So most people are willing to give up a little bit of income when they're healthy to receive that large income transfer when they're sick. And this additional income is going to be more valuable to an individual when he has less and less of it. One of the big debates is basically when should government get involved in the healthcare market. So economic theory tells us that basically government should get involved in some way, shape, or form when there's a market failure in that market. So failure of public goods, we'll talk about in a minute. Monopoly power, when there's only one supplier in a given area. There are externalities, imperfect information, or issues over property rights. We don't know who owns what. So public goods, pure public goods must be non-rival and non-excludable. So non-rival means when I use this good, it doesn't diminish someone else's use of that good. I don't take it from them. And non-excludable means I can't stop anyone from using it. So classic example is clean air. So it's non-rival. When I breathe clean air, it doesn't stop my neighbor from breathing clean air. I can't exclude someone else from breathing clean air short of killing them. So it's non-rival and non-excludable. A big debate is healthcare a public good? So basically we'll say no. Health services provided to one person are not at the same time consumed by others. So when I'm using the doctor, when I'm seeing the doctor, and the doctor is seeing me, that doctor is not seeing somebody else. So it is rivalrous, and for those who can't pay for some care, won't get that care, so it is excludable. But what I like to think about is, what about health? My health, I believe, is a public good. So with me being healthy, that helps others. No one can stop me from being healthy, and me being healthy doesn't discourage someone else from being healthy. Me being healthy doesn't take health away from someone else. So health is a product of healthcare. So we can argue that healthcare itself is not a public good, but the outcome of it, health, can be considered a public good. So externalities. Externalities are going to come about when some third party is affected by someone else's consumption, production, choices, basically. So we think about, again, clean air or unclean air, a polluter. If some company is polluting the water, it's going to have negative externalities on the neighborhood around them. So the people drinking that water, those people drinking the water didn't do anything to pollute that water. It was some other party's fault, but they are bearing the brunt or some consequence of it. They're both positive and negative externalities. So that was an example of a negative. For a positive externality, think of car alarm systems. One of the older examples is that of LoJack. So a thief looking to steal a car in a neighborhood, he knows someone in that neighborhood has LoJack. He doesn't know who, though. So he's going to avoid all the cars instead of trying his luck. So the one person that bought LoJack for his car is providing these positive externalities for his neighbors, because that thief isn't willing to take the chance on picking the one car with that system. So thank you for listening. This is a very quick primer on a little bit of health economics. I hope you haven't fallen asleep by now, but thank you for listening.